if I can literally prevent somebody or delay somebody to have to hire a CFO by an extra year, right? That a CFO is going to run you 150 grand a year. And that's really where the money comes through. The biggest challenge that I have with entrepreneurs is trying to explain to them the longer term mentality. I talk to clients and I run projections by them, and they're like, well, Luis, how can you save me money? And how can we like find me some areas where we can cut costs? I'm like, hey man, you don't have any costs, right? Mm-hmm. You're not running a multinational operation here where people are mooching off of you. It's a small space. My job is to prevent costs.
It's time for another episode of the Cold Star Project, the podcast about the unexpected challenges of scaling. And today we're going to talk about financial foundations, which is the title of my guest book, Luis Lomanov. And it is, well, the topic is, he calls it The Entrepreneur's Guide to Becoming a Builder. And what he does is all about growth, scalable financial infrastructures for businesses that are growing fast. And well, this podcast is all about processes and systems and that, Luis. So it's great to have you on. I spotted you on LinkedIn and I was like, I got to have this guy on because he is talking about something that a lot of people don't know about and don't talk about. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Yeah, I mean, the topic is, it's certainly not, it's not out there because it's the people that are supposed to be bringing this up are supposed to be people like me, right? And my profession, unfortunately, hasn't directed itself in that trajectory yet. So
okay, so this is pretty new then, in a sense. So you're a CPA. What does scalable financial infrastructure mean?
So let's think of a business, right? You've got investors, you need to run projections, you receive payments from customers, you need to pay bills, all these things that revolve around money, right? In order to make the business operate. If you think about what's involved in all those things, just from a financial perspective, right? So I'm an accountant by training, and when I think about when money needs to be moved or money needs to be reported, I think about the three things that has to be present. It's your people, systems, and processes. So, for example, when you think about just paying bills, what system should be used, right? How do we get approvals? How do we make sure that the bill that's not approved doesn't get paid? So there's a whole heap of like processes and systems that need to be in place, and more importantly, people. Most companies, the way that they go about implementing systems and processes, they really just it's an ad hoc process where like a problem occurs, let's solve it with a system. And what happens is when you solve problems that way, you don't realize what those problems then end up morphing into later down the road, right? So if you design the infrastructure and let's say a process around paying bills or approving bills or reporting to the investors that fits your needs today, then as soon as your needs change, you then have to reconfigure everything. So you're constantly are putting yourself in a position where you're being taken away from things like sales, taken away from things like managing, building the culture of your business, into doing minutia things like that. But if you build it up front with the intent of making sure that, hey, what happens when the level of activity that's currently going on in the business, quadruples or goes from 1x to 8x, those activities then, the processes and the systems that you put in place need to be able to handle that so that you don't have to then come back and rebuild all these things. And that's the whole premise of Scalable. Scalable is just one of the things that a financial infrastructure needs to have, right? A good financial infrastructure needs to have three components or three characteristics. It needs to be cost-effective, efficient, and scalable. Efficiency is a term that refers to time, and cost, the effectiveness is obviously referring to money. And scalability, the reason I point that out is because that's one of the things that, it jumps to people's minds and it makes sense, but it's not necessarily something that is actually implemented. And the differences between what's scalable and what's not scalable doesn't necessarily jump out to people.
Okay. And that makes tons of sense. I mean, this show is about the unexpected challenges of scaling. And it is pretty unexpected when you build a system and you're all proud of yourself, right? You're like, hey, I built this system to handle this finance problem. And then you grow and it just breaks because you got too much flowing through the pipe, right? Or the requirements have totally changed, and then you're shocked. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, the number one thing that usually happens with pretty much every entrepreneur is that it's like when you first start a business, it's pretty normal for you to go out and, like, as soon as you can afford it, you hire a bookkeeper, right? A bookkeeper typically will then start. All the bookkeeper does is literally is categorize transactions. That's the definition of the function. And what happens then, let's say the business gets to a position of, all right, now I've got investors and I need to report financial statements to them. There's certain quality expectations that they have. Now, a bookkeeper doesn't know how to put together quality control procedures and then if you get financial statements from your bookkeeper, you're then, like, trusting that they're correct because you're not an accountant. You wouldn't know what's correct and what's not. You then send that to the investors. The investors see enough of those to pinpoint errors, or errors are found later down the road. And then you just look like somebody who doesn't know how to pick a team and how to build, the business. And it happens all the time, but it oftentimes gets massaged of, like, well, I didn't know this happened. The bookkeeper is fired. In reality, it matters. It's not the bookkeeper's fault. Bookkeeper is delivering the level of service that's expected of somebody like that. When you're paying them, $15 an hour, what do you expect? So.
Okay, great example. So, what level of business requires a scalable financial infrastructure? When do they need it?
Yeah, well, under ideal circumstances, everybody would have one, right? But then it wouldn't be as interesting. What determines, for me at least, whether an entrepreneur needs to have this or not is the level of financial maturity that they want to have for their business, right? And sometimes financial maturity is actually being imposed onto a business as well. Usually, whenever you get investors, certain level of financial maturity is imposed onto you, right? There's expectations. But if you don't have investors, it's really just up to you, right? Do you care to know anything more than just, how much cash came in the door this month? Then that financial maturity piece is something that an entrepreneur needs to figure out for themselves. And then beyond that, figure out, all right, well, I don't want, financial engineers and having to deal with the foreign currency translations and hedging and all those things, right? And that a lot of businesses don't need that. But for some businesses, and actually it's very common nowadays, you're going to go out and you're going to get investors. Even your less sophisticated investors out there are going to expect at least quarterly reporting to them, right? And what does that look like? What's the formatting? How do you make sure that you're not giving them numbers that are not correct, and all those things? So up front, if a business is bootstrapped, then I recommend just kind of getting your regular systems like QuickBooks and all that stuff, and then just running with those until you find yourself in a position where I think I can afford better information and better data and better financial infrastructure, and two, I want it and need it. So that's how I would go about it.
Okay. What do you wish that business owners could know before you ever went up to them or talked to them?
The whole premise of thinking about financial infrastructure as a whole, right? So we oftentimes, and it's very common to hear, a business is a system of systems, right? And what I'm talking about is just a cog, an important cog in that entire wheel, in that entire system. And that's the place where I specialize in. The reality of the matter is the entrepreneur needs to kind of look, you oftentimes think in terms of these systems of systems, and you're trying to figure out, hey, well, what does my sales processes look like? What does my HR processes look like? What are my other things looking like? And if I have an entrepreneur that's thinking in terms of those things, then it makes sense to them when I have, when I'm talking about these financial infrastructures and like these different components, different things that they need to put together. So a general understanding of what those are, and more importantly, what a good, like, quality control in my industry is a huge problem. I encounter even big companies that don't know what quality control and financial reporting looks like, right? I've literally had clients that would, their financial statements would show over $1 million in a bank, but the reality of the matter is that wasn't the case at all. And it happens all the time, and it wasn't a malicious intent by anybody. It really just was a bookkeeper was clicking too many buttons that they didn't understand what the buttons did. And that's kind of the, some of the problems out there. So understanding what are the pitfalls are, understanding what a good financial infrastructure looks like versus a bad one is, that's kind of the next step. And then from there, I don't recommend for entrepreneurs to bog themselves down oftentimes with like the details of this, because like, why, right? I think if there's anything that you're going to master as an entrepreneur, it should be sales, right? If there's one place you need to figure out how to do on your own in case, everything hits the fan, master that.
Okay. What about entrepreneurs? I mean, I don't think I'm unusual in this respect. I have a business degree. I took years of accounting, cost accounting, finance, all the way up. And this is like 20 plus years ago, but still. Yeah. What can a business owner who has that under their belt and it's sort of, a vague memory of understanding of this stuff, can they make use of that before they work with you to kind of accelerate things along or help themselves with their mindset about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole purpose of, like, when I wrote the book, that was that was the person that sat in front of me.
Okay.
Like the book was written in a very conversational style, as I imagined literally myself sitting in front of an entrepreneur, and I have his time for 8 hours, meaning I'm going to bore him to death for 8 hours. How can I do it with the most impact to him? And that's how I built it. So yeah, you can do that.
Hey, this is Jason Kanigan, the founder of Cold Star Tech and the host of this podcast, the Cold Star Project, which is about the unexpected challenges of scaling. We talk with business owners and they share their experiences growing their businesses and what happened to them, so that you can learn from it, so that you don't get punched in the face quite the same way that they did. So today's episode is sponsored by The Closing Engine, good friends of mine. They are all about taking over your sales, that whole sales department, and doing all that work for you, getting the right people on board, managing them. I mean, all the way from generating leads through to making the sale. And that takes so much stress off of business owners. I can't tell you how impactful it is. I've seen it time and time again over the last couple years. They get in there, they sell the way you would, they get the right people in there, they're coached, they're trained, stay on target. You get a whole bunch of metrics from them, great people. And the result is you are freed up to truly be a CEO, a true strategist. You can go out there and instead of trying to plink off customers in onesies and twosies, right? You get to go out there and make those strategic alliances. Or maybe you get to focus on creating a new product or service that you never had time to before. I mean, this is very exciting. So if you want to talk about that kind of transformation and find out whether or not it's a fit for you, you can set up a no obligation call with me. We can talk it over. I know all about it. And if it's the right thing, then I'll send you on to them. If not, hey, you'll learn something. You'll learn a lot, and we'll figure that out. All you have to do is go to this link, coldstartech.com/book-call. coldstartech.com/book-call. It'll set you up. I'll ask you 3 or 4 questions, Tell me, hey, I came in from the podcast and I want to talk to you about the closing engine, find out if we're a fit. Great. And that'll set it up and we'll have a chat about that. All right, back to the program.
The challenge is that these systems are like, there's a lot of software out there, and it's an amazing time to be in business, right? Because you can just deploy software to do pretty much everything for you. The challenge is that a lot of these softwares are they break and they don't function well together. And it's not that they don't function well together at all. It's like 99% of the time or 95% of the time they function well, and then those other 5% is what's screwing everything else up. And so you can go through, and the first thing that I would recommend, right? So if you're if you're an entrepreneur who is just like, I just want to get me to a point of where I can be in a position to actually get somebody who knows what the hell they're doing and fix this for me, maybe bring in a CFO, maybe bring in somebody else who's familiar with this. You go through, just make sure that keep it in as much order as possible, because that's what really gets expensive on the back end, is when you're having to dig stuff up. I had a client who came to me and said, well, we haven't done anything since the business started like 3+ years ago. And I'm just like, well, what do you, there's nothing you can do. Now you can't even do anything at this point until you fix everything that hasn't been done. So don't neglect the whole accounting piece, right? Hire a bookkeeper, pay them the $15 an hour, go to Upwork and get them to do the minimum stuff. And if you're really concerned about getting quality people, right, I just recently, yesterday, I spent like 2 hours trying to think through what are the 3 questions that I would ask an accountant, a controller, and a CFO if I was to hire them, right? I would ask each one of them one question. And like I wrote that up, and they're very technical questions, but you can find me on LinkedIn and you can see the post on there. But It's really an accountant. You ask them, hey, how do you recognize revenue and expenses? If somebody tells me that, well, I click the button and the system tells me, to me that indicates that this person doesn't understand anything beyond of how the system operates. And that's the most dangerous, right? That's how you get people that are clicking buttons, don't understand what the hell they mean. Controller, you ask them about quality control procedures, right? Because that's a controller is the person that builds out these infrastructures, so they should have a good understanding of those. A CFO, ask them about, one of the first things that a CFO is going to do for you is run projections, run financial models. Ask them about how the financial model incorporates timing of cash flows, right? That's your that's your holy grail of financial modeling. And depending on how these people respond, you can get an understanding of their base level interpretation, understanding of the whole infrastructure, the whole system that has to be in place. What I don't like, and I do this with when I do evaluations for my clients, right? Oftentimes they have accountants in place. And so what I do is I do an interview and I basically ask them questions. Hey, tell me about X, tell me about Y, and I expect certain, I don't have this is the correct answer, this is the wrong answer. I'm looking to gauge their understanding of things and the actions that they have taken. If they've taken certain actions, that they have certain understanding, then great, right? You're good to go. You can trust this person. But if one, there's a lack of understanding, and 2, there's been a lack of action, because somebody may understand QC, but the fact that they haven't taken any action to actually deploy that for you is, that says something about them and their service. So I was working, to continue the example, I was working with a client, did an eval of their accountant. And this happens, it's not that common. It's common, but it's not like super, super prevalent. And I was actually really surprised. like the accountant that was doing work for them, that was managing pretty much the entire thing, and they were paying for like high level service because it was a larger firm, for high quality. The bookkeeper, or they're referring to them as an accountant, but they were really a bookkeeper, had like no training in accounting, no support from their upper management, and no training from them whatsoever. And it was just kind of ridiculous for me to sit there and try to ask. Like at that point, I just didn't stop asking questions because I'm like, none of what I'm going to ask is going to make even remote sense. So there's a huge problem in trying to evaluate how to really hire. Like I wouldn't know how to hire a developer, right? But a developer would be able to tell me who a good developer is and who a bad developer is. So like get a bookkeeper, get an accountant, try to vet them to the best of your abilities. And when you vet them, ask them questions that get at the heart of whether they understand the principles of what it is they're trying to achieve for you, right? If I was hiring somebody in HR, I would want to make sure that they understand very clearly of what it takes to build culture, right? If I'm hiring somebody in sales, I want to understand very, very clearly that this person understands how to build relationships with my customers, not just sell them shit. So that was a rambly answer, but
that's okay. And it explains why you wouldn't want to just throw more bookkeepers at the problem. Very quickly you're going to uncover the level of sophistication of the person that you're talking to. As you've discovered on occasion, they're going to be a lower level than they're being paid for, or that the company has expectations of. What do you do from that point? I don't know. But you're going to go back and tell your client that, right? And somebody's not going to be happy about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole premise behind, right? So my job is, how does a guy like me like justify the cost, right? Mm-hmm. So like, why would you ever want to hire somebody who's going to charge you money to seemingly do something that you're not necessarily sure what the value is? And I finally I actually had this issue with one of my clients. They were like getting pushback from the CEO about like, what are we doing? Why are we spending money here? And what I'm trying to achieve is, if you look at the life cycle of any business, eventually the biggest, especially in the space that I'm in, is tech, right? And tech space, the biggest cost driver for any business in that space is people, right? So your payroll is going to be non-existent to very low at the beginning, then it's going to skyrocket. My job is to then say, all right, well, I know what functions your business needs to handle this particular piece of the operations financial piece, right? You're going to need people, and I know how you're going to expand personnel wise in that department if you continue growing and you don't do certain things, right? So if I can literally prevent somebody or delay somebody to have to hire a CFO by an extra year, right? That a CFO is going to run you $150,000 a year, and that's really where the money comes through. I have the biggest challenge that I have with entrepreneurs is trying to explain to them the longer term mentality. I talk to clients and I run projections by them, and they're like, "Well, Luis, how can you save me money? And how can we like find me some areas where we can cut costs?" I'm like, "Hey, man, you don't have any costs, right? Mm-hmm. You're not running a multinational operation here where people are mooching off of you. It's a small space. My job is to prevent costs, and but it's actually a very hard thing to sell, right? Mm-hmm. As somebody's like, one of the exciting things for me as an entrepreneur right now is to figure out like, how do you sell? That's like the next skill that I'm learning. Mm-hmm. And prevention is hard to sell.
Yeah, it is. Let's talk about real quick operating capital, the debt and debt service. How does that play into a scalable financial infrastructure? Because as time goes on, the expenses are going to go up, which means the loan needs to go up or the line of credit needs to go up, and then it's like, is this good or sane or bad or what?
Yeah. So on a specific topic of loans, it's very uncommon nowadays or at least for me with the businesses that I work, to actually see business loans. Because like if you're in a more mature business where you have tangible assets, it's a lot easier to actually secure capital in the form of a loan from a bank. That's I refer to that as traditional capital. The more What's more common nowadays, especially in the tech space and any sort of like even young startups, capital comes in a form of equity. And that you typically go in, and there's a round one. You typically refer to it as the seed round. Right. Then there's like seed two, and then there's a whole heap of seed rounds. Then you have a priced round. Then you have round B and round C and all that stuff. So the challenge that you're then going to experience is I talk to entrepreneurs about this all the time, is you're going to experience dilution, and you're going to go from a position of owning 100% of a small business to owning 10% of medium to large business. Yeah. Which one would you rather have? And that's up to you at that point. But dilution is a challenging piece. In terms of operating capital, the majority of companies that I work with lose a lot of money, right? They come in, and some of my clients lose hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. And that's just because of the type of trajectory that they've chosen to pursue. Right, fast-paced growth when you're trying to outpace the competition requires a lot of capital invested up front. So tech space is notorious for its very favorable revenue models, right? So that's your SaaS models, for example. You're paying recurring subscriptions, or the next phase of that is like prepayments for the next 2 years or whatever it is. Right. And that's really the best way to fund the business, is to get customers to fund you. But if you need to be in a position where you have to develop a new version of the platform, you need engineers for that, and those guys aren't cheap. You got to pay them $150,000 a year. If you're in the artificial intelligence space, software engineers in that space are running you closer to 200. Yeah. So then, it's very super challenging to actually run a profitable business at that point without having to then take on capital and actually burn it. So now, what happens then is you have a very time is your biggest friend and enemy. Right? If you take on $2 million, and that means what's your burn rate, what's your run rate, what is the exact time that you're going to run out of cash?
Right.
And that's where you get into an area where like CFOs are required, or not required, but preferred for you to be able to understand when exactly is the time frame that you're going to lose money, and that's you get into the realm of timing, cash flows, and all those things. So operating capital is a challenging piece, right? But what I do want to note, which I find interesting, is that nowadays profitability doesn't even matter. It's not how businesses are being valued and being assessed. What is valuable nowadays is actually the continuous improvement and build out of an asset. If you think of a business as an investment vehicle, which is how all of your investors are going to look at a business, then you're looking at, right, you're both looking at an apple, versus one person's looking at an orange and the other person's looking at an apple. If you're both looking at it as an investment vehicle, what increases the value of the investment vehicle? Right? Is it IP? Is it personnel? Is it your customer list? Is it your revenue stream, or your potential for future revenue? That's what builds out these valuations. And that's why we're seeing such and have been for the last decade here, valuations that are just outrageous. The there's a bigger and bigger discrepancy between profitability and valuations. One is going down, the other is going up. And what explains that is the asset that's being built. Look at Tesla is one of those examples. It's nothing but an investment vehicle at this point, right? It's from a financial perspective, but the valuations are through the roof. What explains that? Well, the fact that to recreate something equivalent to that, and the data and the infrastructure and all the supply chains and all those other things is tremendous. That's where the value of Tesla is. It's not in its cash flows at this moment. Hopefully it will be at some point. And that's when you're building out a company, you then have a choice, right? Are you going to head towards and try to pursue the unicorn status, or are you going to try to pursue kind of a lifestyle business? And it just really depends, right? So if you're pursuing a lifestyle business, then yeah, you're eventually going to encounter loans. You're eventually going to encounter more operating capital issues, and there's nothing wrong with debt, so long as you manage it right. And what does that entail? That could be another book in itself, and I'm sure there's plenty about that.
Right. Well, let's get to your book here, and that can kind of end us up at a good spot, I think. So my guest is Luis Lomanov. He's a CPA. He runs a company called Upward Insights, and he is the author of this book, Financial Foundations, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Becoming a Builder. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, first of all, where people can get it and who the right person for it is, and I guess who that same kind of person ought to be talking to you, right?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. I wrote the book, but for some reason I never expected anybody to read it, even though my publisher somehow managed to get it into an Amazon bestseller list, which whatever that. But I wrote it really for the entrepreneur, right? It's if you're running a business that is of really any size, whether it be you just started the business and you're starting to think about this stuff, or whether you've been in business for 10 years but really haven't really gotten the business going, this book will kind of be for you. If you already have a huge, a bigger business in place, then this book might not necessarily be for you, with the exception of trying to get kind of the biggest business. Literally, the introduction alone will get you everything you need. Everything else will be useless. But it's designed for if you can't work with somebody like me who knows this stuff in and out and can come in and answer questions without really blinking, then this book is designed to kind of give you the roadmap, right? And a lot of times what I recommend is, and it's in the book, is like how to actually implement this. It's designed to be a guide, not kind of a theoretic book. What is easy in there, I describe, right? It's kind of the implementation of certain systems, certain basic things. What is more technical, I just recommend paying somebody. And oftentimes people like me, if you find a CPA or if you find an accountant out there, a lot of advisors will actually give you some pro bono work up front in order to establish a relationship with you when you're a larger company, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So build out those relationships, establish connections with people that are in the space, right? Find yourself lawyers, find yourself accountants, find many of those guys, right? So you can tap each one of them for some free advice, and get yourself a network of these professionals, right? Sales developers and all these other people that you can go to them and call in a little chip a favor, and then later down the road you'll find a way to repay them either with business or referral, whatever it may be. That's how business starts, right? It's relationships, build out a network, Building out the right team for you is for pretty much any entrepreneur is kind of key.
I agree. So that sounds really good. And then I imagine a lot of folks read it and go, Luis, can you just implement this for me? That's probably the route I would end up going down. Take it off my hands. It's way cheaper than me trying to stumble around implementing this stuff. Where could people go to connect with you? Should they just connect with you on LinkedIn, or is there a website as well, or what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, you can go onto my personal website. You can go onto my company website, which is upwardinsights.io. My personal website is luislomanov.com. You can contact me through LinkedIn is a great place as well. Yeah, those are kind of the places. I don't give out my cell phone number to the internet, but I do make it available to anybody that just kind of reaches out and sends a message. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of that way, unless I'm on a backcountry, then I just don't have service.
All right, Luis. Well, thanks for being here. I learned a lot.
All right, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
This is Jason Kanigan, the host of the Cold Star Project. If what you've heard today has sparked some interest in you and you're thinking, hey, maybe I could implement some of this stuff in my own business, maybe it's time to book a call with me and find out. There's nothing really stopping you from doing this, You just got to go to this link, coldstartech.com/book-call, coldstartech.com/book-call. Go there, answer a couple of easy questions, tell me a little bit about your situation, and we'll get on and we'll find out whether there's anything that I can do to help you or not. And if not, hey, you'll learn something. If it is a fit, then we'll get on implementing stuff like what you've heard about today in your operation. Thanks, and let's talk soon.